So it was just this past Easter Monday, April 21st, 2025, that the news came through. Pope Francis passed away. He was 88.
Yes, the 266th Pope, and of course the very first from Latin America, the 12-year papacy.
12 years, yeah. And it definitely stirred up a lot, didn't it? I mean, you saw everything from real global admiration to, well, pretty strong criticism from some conservative corners.
Absolutely, a real spectrum of reactions.
So today, let's try and, unpack that a bit. Look at his life, his papacy, maybe get beyond the immediate headlines.
Sounds good. When someone of that stature passes, especially after more than a decade in such a visible role, it makes you reflect. And understanding the why behind those different reactions, well, it means looking at his journey.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, way back in 1936.
Right, to Italian immigrant parents, which is an interesting background detail itself.
And he wasn't always headed for the church, was he? He worked as a chemical technician first.
That's right. Bit of a different path initially. It sort of shows the different life experiences that eventually shaped him.
Then he entered the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, in 1958.
Mm-hmm. And the Jesuits, they have this reputation for intellectual focus, education, social justice work. He was ordained as a Jesuit priest in '69.
And later became a provincial superior for them in Argentina.
Yes, overseeing the Jesuit community there. It's also worth remembering, especially given his later global role, he had a serious bout of pneumonia when he was just 21.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and actually had part of one lung removed.
That definitely adds a layer, thinking about the physical demands later on.
Yeah.
So how did he move from that Jesuit formation in Argentina to, well, the center of the Catholic Church?
It was a steady climb within the hierarchy. He became an auxiliary bishop in 1992,
Okay.
then Archbishop of Buenos Aires in '98, which is a major leadership role in Argentina.
Right. A very significant position.
And that really put him on the path. Pope John Paul II made him a cardinal in 2001.
By that point, what was his reputation like?
He was known for his pastoral side, really focusing on the community. But also, he had this strong academic background, philosophy, theology. People saw him as approachable, living simply, someone who connected with everyday folks, but also had that intellectual depth.
That combination seems key.
Yeah.
And then, 2013, Pope Benedict XVI resigns, a huge moment.
A massive moment, very rare. And that led to the conclave that elected Bergoglio.
March 13th, 2013. I remember watching when the white smoke appeared, and then he stepped out. And the name he chose, Francis.
Instantly significant, wasn't it? Choosing Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, it was like a mission statement right from the start.
Yeah, you immediately thought, poverty, peace, care for creation.
Exactly. It signaled his core concerns. It wasn't just picking a name, it was setting a direction.
And his actions seemed to follow suit pretty quickly. Those symbolic breaks, the simple black shoes, not the red ones.
The plain silver cross instead of gold.
And deciding to live in the Casa Santa Marta, the Vatican guest house, not the Apostolic Palace.
Right, living among other clergy rather than in the more isolated papal apartments. Those things, while symbolic, spoke volumes. They signaled a different style, perhaps more humility, more closeness.
And that style carried through into the substance of his papacy, didn't it? Reform was a big theme.
Definitely. He put a lot of energy into financial and administrative reforms within the Roman Curia, the Vatican's bureaucracy.
Trying to bring more transparency, accountability.
Yes, exactly. Modernizing things, making processes clearer. It wasn't without challenges, of course. There was pushback.
I can imagine. And then something that had huge global reach. Laudato Si, his encyclical on the environment.
A landmark document, really. Published in 2015, it was this urgent call for action on climate change, but framed importantly in moral and ethical terms.
Connecting faith and ecology.
Precisely. And emphasizing our interconnectedness with the planet. It resonated far beyond the Catholic Church, really fed into the global conversation on sustainability.
He also played a role on the diplomatic front, didn't he? That US-Cuba rapprochement in 2014.
Yes, the Vatican played a key mediating role there. It was a good example of how that kind of quiet diplomacy, facilitated by the Church, can help bridge long-standing divides. His personal push was seen as quite important.
And throughout it all, this constant theme of outreach to the marginalized.
Absolutely central. His visits to places like Lampedusa, meeting migrants and refugees.
Bringing some refugee families back to Italy with him on the papal plane.
Those were powerful moments. More than just gestures, they were concrete acts of solidarity. He consistently spoke up for migrants, for the poor, emphasizing dignity and compassion.
But as we said at the start, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were controversies, pushback from more conservative elements within the church.
For sure. Things like the cautious opening towards conditional blessings for same-sex couples, or the restrictions he placed on the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass, those moves definitely sparked debate and strong opposition in some quarters.
Seen by some as breaking too much with tradition.
That was the concern for some, yeah. A feeling that maybe he was moving too far too fast or straying from established doctrine on certain points. It created definite tensions.
And the clergy sexual abuse crisis. That remained a huge shadow, and his handling of it drew criticism, especially early on.
Yes, there was criticism about the pace and decisiveness of the church's response under his leadership initially.
But there were steps taken later.
There were. You had the Global Summit on Abuse in 2019, bringing bishops together specifically on that issue. He also brought in new rules, making bishops more directly accountable for how they handled cases in their dioceses.
And lifting pontifical secrecy for abuse cases.
Right, a significant move aimed at increasing transparency in the investigations. So while the criticism was there were also these subsequent efforts to address the structures that allowed abuse to happen and be covered up.
And now his passing, Cardinal Kevin Farrell made the announcement Monday morning. Complications from chronic lung disease linked back to that illness in his youth, perhaps.
It seems likely. And the reaction, well, reports from St. Peter's Square describe crowds gathering, the bells tolling, a sense of gravity.
And tributes pouring in from world leaders. Macron, von der Leyen, highlighting his moral voice.
Yes, focusing on his defense of the vulnerable, his calls for peace, his environmental advocacy. He certainly had a significant global profile.
But it's also crucial, isn't it, to acknowledge the other perspectives. Groups like the Women's Ordination Conference pointing out the lack of movement on ordaining women, for instance.
Exactly. His legacy is complex. You have those who saw him as a reformer pushing the church forward, and others who felt he didn't go far enough on some issues or perhaps went too far on others, particularly regarding tradition. It reflects the diversity and the tensions within the church itself.
So what happens now? What are the immediate next steps in the Vatican?
Well, the protocol kicks in. The Camerlengo Cardinal Farrell, in this instance, formally verifies the Pope's death and seals the papal apartment.
Right.
And then preparations begin for the period known as the Sede Vacante, the empty seat. This leads up to the conclave.
The conclave, where the cardinals elect the next pope.
That's right. All the cardinals under the age of 80 will gather, sealed within the Sistine Chapel, to deliberate and vote until a successor is chosen. A new chapter begins.
It really feels like the end of a distinct era. Pope Francis's papacy was so strongly marked by those themes of mercy, the environment, the poor.
Unquestionably. He leaves behind a church deeply influenced by his priorities and his style, inspiring great affection in many, while also prompting significant debate among others.
So maybe a final thought for listeners to ponder. How will his efforts, his attempts to sort of bridge tradition and modernity, how will that ultimately shape where the Catholic Church goes next and its place in the world?
That's the big question, is that how that tension plays out will be something to watch in the years to come.